after Buckminster Fuller's Keystone book. Basically, what are the steps to reach relative symbiosis with the planet in view of where we are right now? So in light of that, this is one of my favorite poems from Robert Frost, and for me very much illustrates the path we're on right now. He writes, I advocate a semi-revolution. The trouble with the total revolution, ask any reputable Rosicrucian, is that it brings the same class up on top. Executives of skillful execution will therefore plan to go halfway and stop. Yes, revolutions are the only salves, but they're one thing that should be done by halves, I guess, to make it rhyme. But for me, this poem very much is, it would be one of my biggest fears, and I think for all of us, if the powers that be right now, ExxonMobil and fast food, are in control of sustainable energy. And basically we are just underpaid minions for green power rather than underpaid minions for forces that destroy the rainforest. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Woody Hastings from Climate Protection. Is that right?
It's the Center for Climate Protection that I work for. Yeah. I'm the Renewable Energy Manager for the Center for Climate Protection. Just want to say I really like the choices for your kickoff. Critical Path was one of the books I read early on, actually, when I was in my early 20s. It was one of the books that sort of inspired me on my way.
Yeah.
Robert Frost is one of my favorite poets, so a lot of people's favorite.
Yeah.
But yeah, I work for the Center for Climate Protection. It's a statewide organization working on developing greenhouse gas reduction policies, promoting policies that work at the community level,
right,
and that are replicable. So community choice energy, which we'll be talking about today,
yes.
And Monterey Bay Community Power. Congratulations, by the way, big time on the launch of Monterey Bay Community Power. I think that's great.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work that I do is couched in something called the Clean Power Exchange. So we'll talk about community choice energy and the opportunities that folks have with Monterey Bay Community Power, their local energy service provider, and a little bit about the Clean Power Exchange program and what's available there.
Great, thank you. So community choice energy, it's the same as community choice aggregation, just two different names for the same thing?
Yeah, and I was actually involved in that sort of switch from community choice aggregation, the legal name of this thing. The law that was passed uses the term community choice aggregation, and what we found as we were launching the program that we launched in Sonoma County. I'm based in Sonoma County. Our organization, Center for Climate Protection, climateprotection.org, by the way, for folks out there that would like to visit. So what we found in the process between 2010 roughly and 2014 of talking to folks about this was that people sort of stumbled on that word aggregation, and that caused confusion, and it's like just sort of wonky sounding.
Yeah.
So we started calling it community choice energy. They are the same thing.
Same thing.
Just a little bit easier to say community choice energy.
We had the same thing right here. We said, should we make a poster? He said, yeah, it's community choice aggregation. How do I spell that? I said, oh, just write community choice energy. So, oh, that's better. People understand that more. It happened like 10 minutes ago.
Too many syllables in aggregation.
Exactly. But that's a great segue. I have the text of the bill here.
Oh, don't start reading the text.
No, I don't want to go over. I just want to show that.
Section 366.2.
Right. I don't want to get in there in this interview, but I wanted to show that it was passed in 2001, January of 2001. So here we are 16 and a half years later and coming online. So for me, and I think a lot of, if I may kind of speak for millennials, this is frustrating for us. Probably frustrating for you guys too.
You know, I will make just one little wonky point right there, which was, yes, the legislation was passed back then, but it did take 3 full years to do what's called the rulemaking process of the California Public Utilities Commission to sort out, to cross the T's and dot the I's of the actual, how will this work? So it actually wasn't available to communities till 2005.
Okay.
So that's when it first really became available.
Okay.
But it did take 10 years.
So 12 years.
Took 5 years, because 2010 was when Marin MCE, Marin Clean Energy, originally launched. And now, yes, for you, it's longer.
It does seem like a while, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. It's a it's sometimes good things take a little bit of time to develop and to grow, and so we strongly believe this is a good thing. The Center for Climate Protection is involved in it because we identified roughly around the year 2005 that in our analysis that this is the single most powerful step a local community can take, a local government can take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that's what Center for Climate Protection is all about. So that's why we care about it. The beauty is it's got lots of co-benefits. If a community choice energy program is developed in what we feel is the right way, in a certain way, where you're developing local renewables particularly, you get a lot of co-benefits. You always get choice with it because for 100 years we haven't had choice about our electricity service. So
Which
you'll
is
get that
un-American.
choice. But you don't, right? We rarely allow a monopoly in our society, don't we? Yeah. We do this in the case of electricity because if you look at photos from New York City in the early 20th century, you see these wires crisscrossing everywhere, and that was competing delivery service for electricity, and so it was clear that you couldn't really have competition in a given service territory for that delivery
as far as delivery in the distribution network.
Rat's nest of wires everywhere. So so we allow a
probably a lot of fire hazards mixed in there.
We allow a regulated monopoly. The downside of that is we've been defaulted into when you move to a regulated monopoly service territory, you don't have a choice about who you're paying your electric bill to. You
currently
just pay that bill. Well, if you until you have something like community choice or solar. Since solar has emerged, folks have the opportunity to put, some folks that can afford it, for example, can put solar on their roof. You're still connected to the distribution utility in both cases with solar, unless you can actually go off grid with solar.
It's way more expensive.
Yeah. Anyway, so in most solar rooftop systems,
grid interconnected, residential.
And with community choice, you're still connected to the grid.
Right.
PG&E, SoCal Edison, those large utilities still do the delivery of the power.
Yes, that's a very good point. And I want to get into the ins and outs. I wanted to briefly also bring up, though, just now, this literally says amended July 18th, which was 10, 11 days ago. California has a goal to be 100% renewable.
Right, that's Senate Bill 100, Kevin De Leon's bill. I believe that is currently in the Assembly Appropriations Committee for folks that want to know, and it is a bill that would bring us to, it calls for the state to be 100% renewable by 2045, I believe is the target.
Right, yeah. So as far as the critical path, and the first step in that book was outlined was the electrical grid. Yeah. So we're kind of being, go for it.
No, go.
Well, I'm just saying we can resist as much as we want, but this is being mandated of us now. It's no longer enough. We're saying you must be 100% renewable. So where do the nuclear plants on the fault lines on the coast come into play in the next?
Well, I think the point about those would be they come out of play. I think the thing we need to start thinking about is what kind of 100% renewable or what kind of carbon-free system do we want to have? Do we want to have the same old system where, big moneymaker, utility scale projects, be they wind or solar or whatever, are now funneling the money and all the benefits to a few folks? Yes. Or are we designing a system where the communities that pay those bills to receive that power are also have other opportunities where you're deploying local, not just the renewable generation, but there's a whole sort of energy system. I don't want to say ecosystem because I like to reserve that to what an ecosystem truly is, the definition of that, but a much broader array of opportunities with the emergence of practical and affordable electric vehicles, with energy storage. We're seeing the same thing happening with storage that we saw with solar over the last 10, 15 years, where the technology is rapidly improving, costs are rapidly dropping. So you're going to see this convergence. It's actually happening right now.
Grid parity.
Grid parity, essentially, or just practicality and availability of storage for everything from utility scale applications, neighborhood scale applications, and right at your own home. People getting a Tesla Powerwall, for example.
And I want to get in, because the California Senate also passed the Cooperative Worker Act, and I want to ask about cooperative work models and seeing that it's nonprofit, but I want to just start with the, you know, going over here in Monterey, I know you're from Sonoma, but you're connected with these groups, right?
Well, so I have been working on, since Sonoma Clean Power launched, and even before, we've been working ever since I came on board at the Center for Climate Protection in 2010. There have been interactions with folks all around the state. And through what I mentioned earlier, the Clean Power Exchange, which is cleanpowerexchange.org, we track community choice development around the state.
Right.
And on that page is an interactive map that includes all 482 cities in the state and all 58 counties.
Yeah.
So I'm in touch on a regular basis with every community choice energy effort in the state. And
it was easier for me to reach you than my local or our local organizing body. Your page just popped up and your contact info is readily available.
We try to make ourselves available, and there are resources and tools and information on that website for folks that want to learn about community choice, or if you're in an area where there isn't community choice, you can learn about the first steps to take to launch one. Fortunately, here in the 3 counties that Monterey Bay Community Power covers, you've got one. It's well on its way, and in fact, we were just talking earlier, you've got to, and here's what's really important here to me, because I'm all about you know, community engagement, public participation in the decision-making process in general, but my field is electricity, energy, and so I want people to be able to be involved in the decision-making about energy that affects their lives. And it's critically important, you know, again, not just for the global climate crisis issues, but nose-level air pollution, employment, jobs that could be available as a result of programs that a community choice energy agency adopts. And coming right up, if this video gets out soon enough and folks see it soon enough, to let them know that, well, you know, on August 2nd, there's going to be a meeting of the operations committee.
I have that page.
And you can, go ahead.
Sorry, one sec. Here's the, John, here's the page. This is how it's organized.
That's the organization, yes. And
so this exists, and it's coming online, because I tell people about this around here, and nobody knows about it.
Well, no, it takes time for people to get to know, and once the enrollment period starts, there will be a lot more information coming out, because that's letters to people. There's like a couple, by law, it's mandated at least 2 notices before it launches, couple notices after it launches. If people aren't interested in it, they can opt out and stay in what's called bundled service for everything with PG&E. So this is that came
up as a critique that I really want to ask you about.
It always does. It's a critique, but remember that this is a choice that's being introduced. It's an automatic enrollment. It becomes the default electricity service provider in its service territory. Why? Because it is a local entity operated by the local responsible, accountable electeds in the area. It is a not-for-profit program. The revenues that come into Monterey Bay Community Power do not go to pay shareholder dividends or high CEO salaries or anything like that. There's something, while you've got this up on the screen, there's something really important I want to point out. Now, you've got this wonderful opportunity to attend the policy board meetings where they make decisions about policy, the operations board where they make more sort of nuts and bolts decisions about some of the programs and how to implement things that the policy board comes up with. But look in that lower left square there, the dark ones, Technical and Community Advisory Committee, Stakeholders, Community, and I can't read what the last, Technical. That is a committee that's going to be made up of, and it's, you know, forming, it's going to be made up of folks from, you know, the community.
I have that up. Well, I just want to take a step back. So community choice energy, basically we will, this summer in San Benito, Santa Cruz, and Monterey County, be opted in automatically to buying 100% renewable energy from a local nonprofit.
Well, so I don't know that it's necessarily 100% anything. So the power mix will be determined once once
they make their
so when
decisions.
you launch a community choice energy program,
Yeah.
There's a certain process that you
Okay.
undertake to issue sort of a request to the wholesale electricity service providers that exist, and there are a couple dozen of them that are certified in the state of California.
Right.
And these are entities that actually own and or broker solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, you name it.
Okay.
Also natural gas, fossil. There's
Right.
still, this is a process of weaning ourselves away from fossil.
Right.
So community choice agencies don't have the opportunity to wave a magic wand
Mm-hmm.
and poof, all of a sudden everybody's getting 100% renewable. You can be procuring 100% renewable, but that doesn't mean you're building stuff overnight.
So it's a
for
mix.
example.
It
So
starts
sometimes
as a mix and it works towards 100%.
Yes,
Hopefully.
yes, yeah.
If we're in
And I should say
in
that
line.
you can procure 100% renewable, and when we say renewable, the state has definitions about
Right.
this. So this is energy that's defined by the state as qualifying for the renewable portfolio standard, which is the thing we're talking about with that Senate bill,
Right.
about 100%
Yeah.
by 2045. The thing I'm talking about, that what we don't have a magic wand for, is to really to develop local renewables and locally based and new renewables,
Right.
whether they are local, regional, or procured from remote locations.
Okay.
The ideal really is to localize it, and there are a number of reasons for that.
Right.
Employment being one, but also eliminating the need for those long-distance transmission lines that
Right.
have efficiency losses and environmental impacts and the like.
Good point.
And it's also the mechanism for allowing the current paradigm to exist, where large projects are funneling the benefits into
Right.
the hands of just a few.
Really, in
recipients.
general, decentralization of
Yeah.
industrial
so it's
agriculture.
decentralization of the physical systems, right?
The
But
infrastructure.
decentralization of the economics,
Right.
decentralization of the benefits. So it's really spreading those benefits around. That's what I think is really exciting
Yeah.
about community choice energy, and we're learning that as we go, that it's really bearing fruit.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the local power plant at Moss Landing is powered by gas. Is gas considered renewable?
It is not. Natural gas, the term natural gas refers to the fact that it exists naturally,
Right, natural.
under the ground. It's always
It's
associated
an
with,
ambiguous term.
it's associated typically with
Fracking.
Oil, petroleum, and coal deposits. It can exist on its own as well, though. But it is a fossil form of energy, and it is finite. There are enormous quantities, but it's ultimately finite.
Right.
You can produce an equivalent. Biomethane is CH4.
Right.
It's the same, basically the same gas. It can be produced from
Right.
from organic materials.
I think the
But-
Regional Waste Management District has some anaerobic biodigester.
Right, anaerobic digesters to produce methane, which is basically the same thing, essentially, for the purposes of this discussion, as natural gas.
Right.
I prefer really to call it, though, because that name seems to confuse people to thinking that, oh, there's something nice and good about it.
Right,
You
right.
put it in your breakfast cereal because it's natural,
Right,
right? No, it's fossil gas. It's fossil gas.
Yeah.
So it has.
It's in the shale. It's
It's
in the structure of the earth, right? And we're mining it
That's
out
right.
with pressurized water
That's
and
right,
kind of
and it's finite.
causing
And so
earthquakes
from
in
the point of
Oklahoma.
it,
And
it creates its own trail of contamination from the point of extraction to transportation, especially with liquefied natural gas ports causing all kinds of problems and hazards, to its final end use. It is not it's arguably the cleanest among the three, or coal, oil, and gas.
Sure.
But it is still a fossil energy, and that's what we're trying to get ourselves away from. But a lot of the electricity in the state of California, from Moss Landing and from other gas plants, fossil gas plants, I'm going to call it fossil. Fossil gas.
fossil gas. Yes,
Fossil
good.
gas plants. That is still a prevalent source for electricity in the state of California. It'll probably remain so for more decades.
Yeah.
We don't use a lot of coal in the state of California, so if folks don't hear our arguments about coal power. That's because we really just don't use a lot here in this. And we have one nuclear power plant left at Diablo, and that one is slated to close in just a few years.
And that is very close to fault lines, right?
So,
like
Fukushima, sure,
no,
I spoke to an engineer in their control room a few years ago after Fukushima happened, and he expressed a lot of concern about they're not, exactly the same engineering there, the same construction, or the same sort of physical setup, but there were things that they learned from the Fukushima disaster that caused them quite a bit of concern. And so, and also since 9/11, just the military presence there, the off-the-books costs to protect nuclear facilities, it's just become something that doesn't really make sense in this era where we've got fuel-free energy sources from the sky, the wind and the sun, and some academics telling us that, from Stanford, Mark Jacobson, for example, that, technically at least, look, you can do this. There's political questions and deployment questions, and so when you really try to install some of these things, there can be some resistance even with solar. We don't want to have solar taking up prime agricultural land. And,
although they're doing us a huge disservice, and wouldn't mind if some brakes were put on their actions. But I'm reminded of Guns, Germs, and Steel, where Jared Diamond says, in England, when they switched from whale blubber to electricity to light the street lights at night, and they said they fought tooth and nail, even though they knew they shouldn't be killing these whales to light street lights, and they wouldn't allow it to switch for so long, and they kept killing whales to fill those street lights with whale blubber, and they just milked it for everything it was worth before they would switch. And I'm just like, solar works. Why is 12, 16, 17 years after we say yes, this works, and yes, let's do it?
I think what we learn, and another really good author for folks to, if they haven't, to check out Jared Diamond. You're mentioning all my favorites. So and so what we have learned is that these transitions from through the centuries, really, in the kind of energy sources we use, take time, and they're not easy, and the entrenched interests in whatever the previous system was fight tooth and nail to keep it around, and there are still trillions and trillions of dollars to be made from fossil energy sources, and so it's not surprising that you've got entrenched interests, and fighting to keep it the way it is, and there's a certain inertia. People learn what they learn and know what they know, and so coal miners that learn that become part of the culture, and there's cultural resistance and all that kind of stuff. So
well, in that train of thought, PG&E is referred to as public. And this, I think, becomes confusing. Public in the sense that PG&E is a company, they're an investor-owned public company. Basically, they're beholden to their shareholders. Their main motivation is to increase profit for their shareholders. Is that safe to say?
So yes, they're actually a private entity, designed to make a profit. However, they are regulated. In this sort of a really sort of a unique situation. Since they're granted to be a monopoly, it's considered a natural monopoly. That's the term that's used. They are a sort of a quasi-private public thing. Since they're not public in this sense, and this is the one that I think is critically important. Go try to knock on the boardroom door of PG&E and be invited in there to help make them make decisions about what's going to go on. And that's, again, this big difference with a community choice energy program being local, accessible, accountable. You can go there and be involved in the decision making. You can step up and join that stakeholder committee that's forming. Those kinds of opportunities are critically important.
And nonprofit.
Not for profit. So there's, again, this is probably a distinction that I don't need to make, but I'll make it. So nonprofit, that term, that's like the organization I work for, Center for Climate Protection, is a nonprofit. It's a legal definition.
501c3
and 501c3, yes. I wasn't going to say it, you did, so that's even wonkier. We don't. Anyway,
Well,
and
there's the whole
so
Bernie
the
revolution,
community choice
501c4.
energies are not 501c. Yeah, right. So people have learned that. Okay, but no, it's not a nonprofit organization. It is a local government. So it's a city or a county that can do this. And in the case of single jurisdictions that do it, like Lancaster in Southern California, for example, has Lancaster Choice Energy. San Francisco has Clean Power SF. It's basically their city councils, and in the case of San Francisco, the board of supervisors that run the show. In the case of Monterey Bay Community Power, it is representatives from each of the local governments that serve on these governing boards, right? And so it is local governments or groups of local governments. So it is a local government agency, or a local government operation, right? So it's not a nonprofit organization. They're agencies, they're governmental agencies.
Okay.
But they are meant to serve the public good, whereas the good distinction you're making is that PG&E, really essentially being a kind of funky, different, unusual private entity, serves to make a profit, and they're guaranteed a profit, by the way, in case you didn't know that. They're guaranteed.
They're insured or something?
11, it's not that they're insured, it's that in the aftermath of the 2001 debacle, and we don't need to go into the thing that Enron's related to, yes, but also their bankruptcy in 2004. In the aftermath of all that, things were set up in such a way that they're guaranteed between 10 and 11% profit, and that's a profit on the sort of investments that they need to make in the distribution infrastructure. They actually, a lot of folks don't know this, they don't own and operate a lot of the generation, the electricity sources.
Oh, really?
They've got Diablo, and they've got some ownership of Hetch Hetchy and a few gas plants. About 30% of the power that PG&E provides is from sources that plants that they actually own and operate. They just do the same thing that most community choice agencies.
So the community would be hiring a renewable power plant, hopefully, rather than a private entity. Anyway, what I meant to say was, it seems like a conflict of interest. And the quote I pulled up from an article, I don't think I have it anymore, was that PG&E acts in the interest of consumers, yet their fiduciary responsibility is to shareholders. Would that be a fair assessment?
Well, in the ideal world, or at least theoretically, acts in the interests of consumers. I should point out that that may be the case at times. I think there are places where you could show, where it could be shown that perhaps they have not operated in the public interest. When you look at things like San Bruno explosion from 2010 is a good example. But where it was clear from the records that they had not put the money into upgrading those pipelines as they should have been, and the safety inspections and all that, and the fact that the California Public Utilities Commission needs to have an Office of Ratepayer Advocate to keep an eye on that kind of thing, and to make sure that things are happening in the public interest, and the referees, who are the ones that the regulators, California Public Utilities Commission, supposed to be operating also in the public interest, and together all operating in the public interest, we find time after time that there are better ways of doing things. And I think we're learning that with community choice energy since 2010 with MCE Clean Energy in Marin County, Sonoma Clean Power, Lancaster Choice Energy, Clean Power SF. There's Peninsula Clean Energy, Silicon Valley Clean Energy. There's about 8 operating right now, and another 8 on deck. And what we're finding is that they're not all the same. Each one's different. And that's actually a beautiful thing, isn't it? Each one sort of reflects what's going on in their own community. The regional needs, regional resources. For example, in Sonoma, we have the geysers geothermal. So we're using that resource there. Other community choice agencies can purchase that. The geysers geothermal is up near Calistoga.
So follow-up question then, does CCE have a fiduciary responsibility to the local, to the people, rather than to shareholders?
Absolutely. I mean, it is accountable to the local customers. In this case, they switch from being this weird term. You've heard the term ratepayer. That's a term that really was devised to make the distinction in the case of an investor-owned utility customer.
You're a ratepayer.
That you're a ratepayer, and the reason you're a ratepayer is because it's recognized that you don't have a choice. You're a ratepayer. You're going to pay that bill, and you don't have a choice. Once you have a community choice, they become customers of the IOU if they, if they so choose to stay with that investor-owned utility, PG&E, or a customer of the community choice.
Do customers tend to choose to
The retained, what do you call, retention rates are very high for community choice agencies, even, you know, with Marin that's been around for a long time, and folks in that community certainly know that Marin Clean Energy exists, and Sonoma Clean Power in operation since early 2014. Folks in Sonoma County know about Sonoma Clean Power.
Yeah.
They do a lot of outreach, and so very high. So it ranges between, I've heard as low as an average of less than 2% in the case of
Go back to PG&E.
Peninsula Clean, right, less than 2% opt out. Yeah, in Peninsula Clean Energy. So you know, 98% retention in Peninsula Clean Energy. That's, I think, the highest I've heard. And Marin, so they were the first to go. Yeah. And this was prior to some laws being passed that disallowed the utilities from PG&E in this case from, you know, doing some real aggressive multi-million-dollar marketing against them and spreading some disinformation and talking to the council members and supervisors in their area. So they had an opt-out rate that was closer to around 20%.
Oh, because they funneled money into the smear campaign and kind of...
Well, yeah, I mean, because there was a marketing campaign against them, against Marin Clean Energy.
But they still kept 80% of the customers.
Yes, 80%. Okay. And as they've rolled out into different territories, Marin now has Napa County and Contra Costa County. Oh, cool. And so, so they've, you know, gotten some excitement and attention from regional counties and cities that have knocked at their door and said, hey, can we join this thing? Because, you know, they didn't feel that they had the sort of capacity to launch their own or will to launch their own. So, and they also saw that Marin was doing a lot of great things, so they've joined MCE Clean Energy as it's now known. Yeah.
So then can PG&E basically make this too expensive by requesting fees, interconnection fees? Oh, you might buy power from them, but we're the ones who control the grid lines, so now it's $60 a month to be connected.
Well, they can do very little without authorization from their regulator, the California Public Utilities Commission. So a lot of these decisions and what's allowable plays out at the California Public Utilities Commission. So far, all of the community choice energy agencies have been able to offer cleaner power at lower rates.
Okay.
And so not much lower.
Every single one.
Competitive, yes.
Higher percentage of renewable at a lower rate.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
So it's playing out in such a way that you know, we do see that when you have a not-for-profit agency working in the public interest, that there is a lot of opportunity to you know, use those revenues in such a way that benefits the public to a greater extent. So yeah, so these issues around fees that might be applied, it is still an ongoing question, and what is fair to make sure that, you know, no one is paying for any costs that are associated with the other entity having an impact each on the other. That's what's critically important. The term is used is indifference, to make each one indifferent that the other one is doing X, Y, or Z.
So there's some legwork to be done here.
Yep.
So another question for residential solar consumers, basically. If I were a homeowner and I wanted to buy a solar system, currently with PG&E, I used to install solar. I kind of geek out on kilowatt hour math and stuff. Currently with PG&E, if you produce more than you consume, they will buy it back from you, but at a wholesale rate, sell it to your neighbor at a retail rate. I hear that with CCA or CCE, this nonprofit local entity will buy back that power at a higher rate, therefore basically incentivizing people to just pack their roofs with solar panels rather than be like, oh, I only need enough for my usage. I'm not really trying to help the community because it's not to my benefit financially. Is that dynamic gonna change?
So, so the term here for folks out there, it's net energy metering is the arrangement that folks have with solar on their roof, and it's a bit of an exaggeration to say that you could just, you know, put as much as you want on your rooftop. There are limits that the state imposes in terms of allowing for you know, solar that you know, to meet your own load, and there's some wiggle room, it can be a little bit more, but when you do produce surplus solar, more than what your needs are, in most cases, most community choice agencies have opted to offer a net energy metering program that does deliver a superior payback on that, on both the compensation for the power you produce and surplus. Right. So you're benefiting there. I should say, though, that every community choice agency is different, and this is a policy question that each one can take on for themselves. So it's not like there's a whole bunch of programs that automatically go along with every community choice agency.
So we need to figure it out in this tri-county area. This is why it's important for folks to weigh in, and solar installers to step up to the plate, and other energy-related businesses, but businesses just in general. I mean, in Sonoma County, we had the wine industry came to a lot of the meetings, and they were interested because they have big wine industry.
They have sustainable policies that they want to do, and they also want to deploy their own renewable systems or bring their energy costs down. Right. And so having that option on their ledger books to start with, where they would have that choice, and also having a new counterparty to talk to about energy projects that they want to do. Each community choice agency is different. So some of them, most of them offer a net metering program that's better than the incumbent utility. Cool. A few of them offer something called a feed-in tariff that's basically a standard offer to project developers. Like, it's a standard offer. Here's what we'd like to see developed in our service territory. If you can do that at this cost, we will buy that power. This is bigger than the rooftop stuff. This is where they might want to put it in on a
industrial scale,
parking lots or utility scale
big box store rooftops.
Big box store rooftop, and you're going to be producing way more than the on-site load, and so you would be feeding that power into the grid, and the purchaser of it at wholesale price would be the community choice agency, then selling it to their customers. But you've got jobs created, and you've got local power being produced, obviating the need for the big transmission lines. And so as we see more and more of that kind of local development, less and less pressure for natural gas or fossil gas plants and the big transmission lines.
Nice. So this article, well, it shows the communities that are already online.
Is that the cleanpowerexchange.org
This is
site?
an article on Good Times, the Santa Cruz paper.
Right.
So,
I think I saw this one. Sure.
But
they're missing Lancaster Choice Energy. I saw in there.
We'll start enrolling this summer.
I got to tell you, I think that's a little bit off, because I was really just, in advance of coming in for the interview, looking at the sort of status of where things are. And at the upcoming meeting on August 2nd, they're going to be discussing what's called the implementation plan, and this is one of the legal
in Watson for this tri-county area.
Yeah, for Monterey Bay Community Power, and so the implementation plan is not certified yet by.
So that's in what, 3 days?
Well, that's in 3 days, but it hasn't gone through. It's assuming that that's in 3 days from now for that discussion about it. So enrolling this summer is probably not happening. I would think it's probably more along the lines of early 2018 that the actual enrollment would be happening. So I did write to the author of this, but anyway.
You saw this article.
I think that's
the one part of the article I wanted to bring up. They say, where was it? They say that they estimate $9 million in surplus a year, somewhere in here. And from your experience in Sonoma and other counties, we have these new programs coming online where we're creating a surplus of tax revenue. We just did the first quarter of revenue with medical marijuana in Monterey. They said they got over $1 million in revenue. I'm like, sounds like a lot of money. Why do the roads all suck? How come the schools suck? CSUMB looks like a disaster zone. The windows are broken, there's graffiti. So if we have $9 million of surplus per year, is it just going to be the same thing with a green hat on? Are they just going to keep getting richer and we'll just have green energy? Or is that being reinvested? And are we building communities? Are we actually changing things? Or are we just
we'll see, won't we? I mean, and we'll see. And I think a big function of whether or not it's going to be something that's really a true benefit, new benefit to the community, and something that results in helping in this transition away from a 100-year-old fossil-based system to a new energy paradigm where we're really seeing something emerge, what we refer to as energy democracy, right? Where people are involved and people have a say and people are benefiting, communities are benefiting. That's a function of whether or not people show up and help make it what it can be. What does happen with those monies? Are those monies going to be reinvested? And they do accrue rapidly. In the case of Sonoma, our estimate, and one of the things we talked about to the local electeds about why it's something that we should really look at doing, was that there's about $200 million a year that leaves Sonoma County to pay for electricity generation.
Oh,
and
right, in the old
that existing revenue takes once you launch your community choice program. I don't know what the number was for the tri-counties, but it was many tens of millions of dollars, no doubt, that now is going to go into local control and will quickly accrue revenues, and what you do with those revenues is critically important. So reinvesting that into programs that make sense, programs that incentivize. I mean, one of the things that's happening in Sonoma, I'll just talk about what's happening there with incentivizing electric vehicles, for example, a buy-down program for EVs, and not just for the rich folks that can already afford it. About 30% of the funds go to care customers, the folks that are already qualified low income that get and those don't go away, by the way, with community choice. There's a lot of the programs that are funded on the transmission and distribution side, they all stay the same. So care is one of them for the low income folks. And so about 30% of these incentive funds in this electric vehicle buy-down program go to those folks. But it's to accelerate the deployment of electric vehicles and the smart charging of those vehicles, so that and when I say smart charging, so it helps to manage when those vehicles are being charged, so that the community choice agency can begin to manage the fact that you've got a lot of solar in the middle of the day and different kinds of mix of power at night. Sometimes the wind is blowing, sometimes it's not, so it's a play between fossil gas and wind power, and you can have a smart system with EVs plugged into the grid that can, if you can get daytime charging, incentivize daytime charging, which they're working on. It gets real wonky, but it's
from
kind
the
of
cars
fun.
when they need to, I heard.
Well, yes, it can be set up so that, because the vehicles themselves are storage, it's batteries. So most folks who drive them, June and I, my wife, came down in a Volt. It's a hybrid, plug-in hybrid. But
so you can.
But we've also own another EV, and so we know that. When you own an EV, you know that you don't always need a full charge. So, as long as you're sort of 80% above, most of your driving isn't that far. So you can do a pre-arrangement with your energy service provider to say, yes, it's okay to,
take some power from my battery.
From the 5%, whatever. So those kinds of things are on the way. And so that's coming. But so programs that Monterey Bay Community Power can offer. So it's important for the community to show up and make sure that those are.
We need to work them all out.
It's
not going to be. It's no cookie cutter model. It's just. So I had a couple last things. This is the Stakeholder survey report, Monterey Bay Community Power. They say they reached out to 36 key stakeholders representing various sectors across the region: agriculture, community service, Latinos, seniors, labor, education, healthcare, etc. So here are these questions. Basically very elementary. Are you aware of community choice power? How do you rate your understanding of our goals, right? Like the state says we want to be 100% renewable by 2045, and we're asking key stakeholders in the community, what's your understanding of our goals? It just seems like there's a huge disconnect. So in their responses, which are a little small, are you aware? Yes, 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 no, somewhat, vaguely. How would you describe it? Closest thing to world peace I've seen.
That was one of the. Are these their answers, or were these options?
The key stakeholders. These are their answers in our community. 36
when
key
was this taken?
stakeholders. Let's see. It was taken.
If it was sort of 2016,
10,
October
14, 16.
2016.
Yeah.
I mean, really, to be
15
honest.
years after the state passed.
Well,
CCA
no, here's
bill.
the thing. Nobody's going to know about this just from that, the fact that it's been around that long and it's going on in other communities. I wouldn't expect that folks.
Well, folks younger than me are bringing a class action on the federal level saying if we keep doing these things, you're destroying our right to live to clean air and water. So for key stakeholders in the community to be completely unaware of what's going on 15 years after this is passed on the state level is concerning.
Well,
disconcerting,
okay.
concerning.
I would say that that the awareness is coming now, really. You've got the agency just recently having held its first committee meetings or governing body meetings.
Right.
And so the marketing, the awareness campaigns, the letters the enrollment letters that will go out, that's all still to come. So and engagement with key stakeholders, folks, business community members, the solar installers, all those. So I think that over the course of the coming, the next few months in the coming year, as Monterey Bay Community Power launches, this is where you really actually have something with a name that you can talk about. Previously, it would have just been a theoretical thing, and it's kind of wonky.
And we're
and it's kind of like
yelling at each other about hypotheticals.
Yeah, hypotheticals, and there wasn't any there at the time, to be honest. So I actually wouldn't have expected them to have paid much attention when business people or anybody, folks, regular folks, are just working on the things that are right in front of them.
Okay.
So this idea about community choice, that would be off in the future somewhere, or something that they don't feel responsible for being the one to make it happen.
Well, stakeholders in the community, the state set the goal to be 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your.
I'm not trying to get too tangential, but
it is. I think the point you're making is
reconcile.
It's important that everybody be involved, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to forget there's a few tools for that that we offer from Clean Power Exchange to make people aware of what's going on. We have an e-news that's for this area, the Central Coast. So it does also includes the Tri-County effort. But it also includes the effort going on Central Coast Community Power, which is San Luis Obispo, Ventura, and Santa Barbara counties are also doing a similar
tri-county
effort. So, tri-county effort. But anyway, we have an e-news, covers this area, comes out every 2 weeks, articles and information about Monterey Bay Community Power and other renewables. So that's at the cleanpowerexchange.org website. We've also just started a new webinar series, and we've got one coming up on August 3rd. Information about that is right on the homepage, so that makes it easy for folks. And so also just at Clean Power Exchange is, as I said earlier, lots of resources and tools. So a lot of the things I've talked about, a lot of the things you've talked about, the map that shows what the development is around the state and the status of Monterey Community Power. It's all there. Try to keep it updated. We welcome feedback from folks. So
a couple more. Have you found in these northern counties where this is already online that these sorts of stakeholders, business leaders, perhaps city or county council members, are in fact shareholders of PG&E, and that they have an explicit conflict of interest and don't want this to pass so that they can keep making money?
Well, in every community, there are, businesses, individuals that have relationships that either work for PG&E or, and PG&E has a lot of involvement in every community. They make lots of donations to organizations around the state. They have their Energy Watch programs in every community around the state. So as Sonoma Clean Power formed in Sonoma County, we interacted with a lot of those folks, and there were resistance based on any number of issues. Some folks just don't like the government being involved in anything or in most things.
Yeah.
And so there's sort of some ideological resistance. You know, I mean, in San Luis Obispo, one of the biggest employers is Diablo, so there's sort of a kind of a tough nut to crack there with sort of the community in that area on that score. And so I think that the answer is yes. I mean, yes, there's resistance. Well, no, well, wait, maybe I'm not understanding the question. So conflict on the interest of,
I'm wondering if key community stakeholders, or perhaps city or county council members who hold seats in governance, are shareholders of PG&E.
Well, I have not seen any issues arise like that. You mean where like a local, lots of the local electeds are, some of them, supervisors and whatnot, have gotten campaign contributions from, you know, PG&E or utility related.
That's not of concern?
That's not necessarily something that's caused any kind of you know, hindrance that I'm, you know, aware of, and so at least not sort of at the local level. And there may, you know, who's to say? I mean, you know, campaign contributions. Certainly, if you ask an elected official, did you receiving money from such and such influence your decision? They'll say no, and maybe it's true, but how do you know that kind of thing? So that's kind of indiscernible. But we haven't seen, if the question is about sitting governing board members having some kind of conflict, from my experience, most of them have really been involved in it and sort of self-selected to make this exciting new program work. That's what I've seen more than anything else.
Good to hear. I can't believe it. So
I mean, the entire city council of Lancaster is sort of gung-ho about it. You know, in Sonoma Clean Power, we have representatives from all the eligible cities in the county, and they're all in there really operating in good faith to make it work. I think we're seeing that across the board. That's what's happening at MCE Clean Energy, with a diverse board of folks from Contra Costa County and Napa County and Marin County all working together. So I have high hopes for Monterey Bay Community Power that there's going to be a diverse group of folks working together to make it work.
It's good to hear.
Yeah.
I have a final question, and I'm curious about the structure of the nonprofit. You mentioned this is all about, in essence, democratizing the energy.
Like energy democracy, sure.
Energy democracy. And what I'd like to bring that to is democracy in the workplace. And basically, is this nonprofit entity that controls, you know, the new decision to choose and hopefully work towards this goal of 100% renewable, is it structured as a pyramid, or is it structured as a circle? Basically, are there rich people on top and workers on the bottom with less of a voice, or is it more of a cooperative, seeing as the state has also already passed an assembly bill recognizing cooperative worker models as successful means to get ourselves out of this recession? I'm wondering if we're going to couple the two, or if because nonprofits have been known to, like, you know, we're not for profit, but I'm the boss and you're my worker bees, which is you know, I've been there before, and it's like this doesn't, the two don't tend to match up. So I'm wondering if the structure of the nonprofits is cooperative or hierarchical.
Well, I mean, I guess I would just point to the models that exist, that you know, the 8 existing, and there's 2. Within those 8, there's 2 essential models. There's the single jurisdiction, and again, that's Lancaster, small town called Apple Valley down in San Bernardino County, San Francisco. Those are all single jurisdictions that have launched a program. And then there's the Joint Powers Authority. In both cases, it is absolutely, there's a structure. I mean, you had the chart up there earlier that showed that structure. It's not a circle. You know, it is structured in a way that works for a local government agency to work, and a lot of local government agencies exist, and you can see their org charts and their structure and how they're put together. Typically, and in the case of a community choice agency, you know, a governing board is sort of the, you know, the policy setting entity, the entity that has the statutory authority, by the way, one of the real powerful aspects of community choice, to set rates, to design rates. And so that's a very strong power, by the way, of community choice agencies, in addition to those multi-millions of dollars that come into their control.
Yeah.
And so they set the policy, and then there's a staff. You know, there's typically a general manager or a chief executive officer that's at a very important position.
Yeah.
And there are community advisory bodies. In the case of your community choice agency, there's the policy and operational boards. Slightly different in different community choice agencies, but it's definitely not a non-structured or sort of completely egalitarian system.
Right.
And by the way, it's what we call lightly regulated by the California Public Utility Commission. When they launch, there's certain parameters and there's certain state goals they would fall under. For example, if SB 100 passes and there's a 100% goal, community choice agencies have to abide by certain state standards.
Right.
The renewable portfolio standard and resource adequacy is one of the things. And so there's a few things that they need to do as a responsible load-serving, customer-serving entity.
Yeah.
And so that is very structured. So yeah.
Thank you.
But see the key distinction for me though is what is the purpose that you've created this structure. Maybe you have a beef with how it's structured in terms of having some hierarchy. Not you personally. One might have an issue with the, that kind of structure. Yeah. But look at what's the purpose of that structure.
No, definitely.
What are they trying to do? Because you could have a similar structure that's got very different purpose. So
no, definitely. This is. I don't want to get too tangential, but I think I hope it's been clear for an audience member what we're talking about, but basically it's just I would hope that we wouldn't say, okay, the people installing these solar farms in this tri-county area, the workers, don't have a union, don't have a voice, get minimum wage, etc. Which is where we're at right now. Installing solar was not a glamorous job. It was barely enough to rent in this area. There's no union. There's no. There's no,
Policy board.
Policy board. Go to the meeting.
Go to the meeting. I'm telling you.
Okay,
and people, a squeaky wheel gets the grease. I mean, this is how it works, folks. In a democracy, we have this opportunity. We're opening this thing up. It's the difference between trying to knock on that PG&E board door and being, invited essentially to participate in your own locally accountable retail electricity service provider, and here it is, and it's this amazing thing that's coming on. So
awesome.
Did I forget anything? She's good too. She's an energy policy person. So.
Yeah. No, if we can totally open it up to the audience.
Questions from the audience?
Oh, good.
And they also encouraged a wage increase for those workers. So you can, because they're a public entity, if the community is prioritizing labor rights, workers' rights, who the agency contracts with, you can have requirements for standards for workers. Right. And that can have a lot of power because you're buying for a lot of people. You do aggregation, which gives you group buying power, which gives you a say in what the terms will be.
Right. Thank you. That sheds some light and makes me hopeful, but at the same time here in Salinas Valley, the way that agricultural workers are treated, there's not much of a voice or rights, so it kind of also makes me fearful for this tri-county area where we have kind of the largest commercial conglomerates of industrial agriculture kind of doing as they please, and workers kind of getting that end of the stick that they get. So, but it's great to hear. Yeah.
Our government electeds that are there.
Yeah.
It gives you a little more accessibility than you sometimes get to your elected
Yeah.
votes, and you have an additional community group involved in the nuts and bolts, which can also
Right.
give you more information, help you engage more effectively with those local electeds.
Yeah.
But if you have really bad local electeds,
Yeah.
you know, that's what you get. But it does give you a way to participate with them.
Mm.
But ultimately, it's democracy around energy decision making, but it does interact with the democracy you have in
Right.
your local elections and your local elected officials. And so you're going to have to be participating in both realms to be able to move what you want forward.
Right. Or perhaps a ripple effect outward from, well, hey, these workers have this body where they get to, you know, have a say.
It could be right. Community choice could be a model that then is adopted in other.
You could choose to contract with solar cooperatives.
Mm-hmm.
You could choose to prioritize solar cooperatives or worker cooperatives and who you're contracting with other than other businesses.
Right.
Local, you certainly might want to prioritize local worker groups over buying power from corporate profiteers far away.
Right. So it's not that, oh, this program has come, like, yay, we're saved. It's
We're
like,
done.
no,
No,
now
this is the beginning.
the hard
This
part.
is actually the beginning.
This is,
That was a
Yeah.
point I wanted to make earlier.
yeah.
We've seen, unfortunately, this process where the community starts to think of the community choice energy, forming it and launching it as the end.
Right.
It is not the end. It's actually the beginning. You want to get there. It's like building a hot rod and then parking it in the garage. You get a hot rod. You want to take it out for a spin. So there's statutory authority on the part of the community choice energy, and it's everything. So some of the things I already mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, like rate setting, right? And yes, they get the revenues and the millions of dollars that they can use for things, but there's also statutory authority to operate energy efficiency programs and to receive funds that are we already pay for these funds, the public goods charges. I was kind of referred a little bit to those earlier on the when we were talking about the CARE program.
Oh, right. The state fund is there, so it applies
Yes,
to CCE.
and it goes on the transmission and distribution. It comes in, it's paid for, those energy efficiency programs and the education centers that operate in different parts of the state and the Energy Watch program and all those programs. Well, community choice agencies can apply for or elect to take over some of those funds to do their own energy efficient.
Nice.
And once again, you're talking more jobs. MCE is doing this. I've been pushing Sonoma Clean Power to do it. They haven't done it yet.
But, right, that's the whole thing. They can apply for it, but it's the voice, is right. It's the level of engagement and.
It's the level of engagement. It's the communities rising up and recognizing what they have. You know, what they have here isn't just a new thing to pay, you know, that line item on their bill. Oh, good, I'm going to be paying for this thing. Somebody else is going to
just paying someone else.
Yeah, no. So,
great.
And yes, your dollars are going to. It's an important point. Your dollars are going to your own local community.
Right.
More of them are.
Yeah.
And theoretically, at least, it's being reinvested into stuff that's better for the community.
Right. So then, okay. So if this is. I was going to wrap it up, but if you guys have time, it's a beautiful
It's your show.
Okay, yeah, exactly. I guess then if this is, you know, a starting point rather than, great, doors closed, we got it, now we're buying from them instead, or, you know, whoever wants to opt out, the 80% or the 98% is now buying from them. But really then has that been the case in Sonoma and Marin where it's, well, who do we want to hire? I mean, what
it's
are
evolving.
we going solar, wind, geothermal?
It's
like
evolving.
You said?
It's evolving. And again, I think what we're seeing the evolution toward, not surprisingly, is there's stuff that we can do in our own community. So we're looking at the various energy resources that exist, seeing how they can be deployed, you know, looking at solar. Solar is such a wonderful thing. It can be deployed in lots of different ways. People love the parking shade structures. You know, you get to park the car out of the sun, and more we're seeing electric vehicle charging being integrated. You know, it's all about integration, integrating. And there are state policies that support this kind of stuff, and that's the direction they see it heading. And the big sort of grid manager, the California Independent System Operator, that's sort of the manager of the overall grid, including all the investor-owned utilities and all of the community choice agencies and all the independents. They're the one that really run the whole thing. They are very much recognize that we are evolving from this old centralized model to a distributed model, and that means local governments, cities and counties being far more involved in community choice energy as the vehicle to be involved. Because you know, a city council member or a supervisor, they have a lot of things to juggle.
Right.
So you don't want them to necessarily take it on unless it's a case where they decide they do, like Lancaster and that.
Yeah.
So you can set up a community choice energy agency. It has its own structure, its own people who have chosen to be involved in that particular chunk of work. And so what we're seeing is this evolution from this sort of simple concept of it of, oh, we're going to buy wholesale clean power and sell it retail, to, oh, we've got a lot of statutory authority to do energy efficiency programs, to get into other energy related systems like transportation. I mean, in Sonoma County, here's why it's important. And this is why it's important to Center for Climate Protection, I think a lot of your listeners, which is that 60% of our greenhouse gases in Sonoma County come from the transportation sector. So if we can get our cleaned up grid, our cleaned up Sonoma Clean Power, having EVs plug into that clean power for their transportation, displacing petroleum fuels that are the big contributor to the climate crisis, that's where we can really make a big dent. So I think Sonoma Clean Power is focusing, and more of the community choice agencies focusing in the right place on fuel switching away from, that's the term, by the way, that's used, fuel switching away from fossil fuels in transportation and fuel switching away from natural gas use in space heating and water heating in homes.
Right.
So that's another area that's being focused on.
That isn't, well, I do work in solar thermal too, and that's very, it's kind of for me like CCA. People are like, what? It's not solar energy? I'm like, no, it's solar hot water. It's like Brazil and China are all over it, you know? Like, what are, and the state funds have kind of been bankrupt for photovoltaics, but there's still all this money available on the state level for solar thermal. Yet,
that's true.
There's
a
relative
program
momentum.
Not a lot. That's because natural gas prices, fossil gas prices right now are very low. We don't think that's going to stay that way forever.
Okay.
And so we'll probably see a reemergence of interest in solar thermal, I think, solar hot water.
And that overlaps. These boards can say, well, now we have 9 million surplus from the last year. Who knows how many millions surplus? Now we're going to dedicate it to, you know, EV chargers or solar thermal systems.
Right, and it's solar thermal, but
or
it's
also
heat pumps. Heat pumps. So you know, when we talk about space heating or water heating, it can be solar thermal, but it's also about heat pumps that that basically they operate on the same principle as your refrigerator, and they can heat and cool in the case of space heating and provide hot water. So, and those are run by electricity. So if they're plugged into clean power, you're cleaning up your energy system.
Nice. Good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm all out of questions.
Plumb out of questions? Well,
would you? Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you. And again, congratulations to Monterey Bay Community Power on launching, and to you for launching your new series.
Yeah, it's been fun. He'll show you guys the
critical
greenhouse.
path.
Yeah, the first one was the aquaponics greenhouse. So, and then what are we going to? We're going to start making oyster mushrooms with the coffee waste from the cafe, and
great. Just
kind of keeping the party going from here.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.